guys, and welcome to Blender Basics 2. We couldn't cover all the basics in the first video, so I decided to make a second one. So we are going to be covering topics by moving like a fixed amount, shift while moving and rotating and scaling, and more of the basic things you can do here in Blender. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start by just doing a little recap of moving and rotating and scaling. So the three operations short keys are G, R, and S. G to move, and you can click an axis to move on a specific axis, R to rotate, and S to scale. Okay, and now today we're going to be talking about doing all these operations but to a fixed amount. So if we go to this toolbar and we go to scene and we go to units, it will tell us what our grid's unit is set to. And right now it's set to metric and 1, so 1 meter. So whenever we do an operation and we put a number, it'll be in meters. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start with moving. So click G and choose an axis, suppose X, and suppose we want to move it by 3 meters. So we type in the number 3 and it moves in 3. If we want it to move 3 in the other direction, we click -3 and it moves it in the other direction. We can do it for not just 1-digit numbers, you can move it by 30. Can't see that. But like 1.5 maybe, like you want to move half. So if you type any, then that will work. And you can do that on any axis. Okay. So that also works for rotating and scaling. So if I click R and I choose Z axis, and suppose I want to do it by 90. So I click 90, and then you can't actually see that. Let's do RZ 45 or maybe 50. And you can do it on the X, 70 maybe. Yeah. So if you type in a number, it'll rotate by that much. And then if you go scaling, you can do a bit extra. If you can just do, you don't have to enter an axis, you can just do the whole thing if you want to scale the whole thing by 2 or scale the whole thing by 3. Or you can scale it down by first typing slash to show division, and then you can put your number. So suppose I want to do divided by 3, and it'll scale down, or divide by 4. Okay. And if you want to do it on an axis, you can do that also. Divide by 2 or scale by 2. You can move, scale, and rotate by fixed amounts. And one more thing I want to talk to you about all these operations is, suppose you want to move on 2 axes at the same time, but you don't want to move on 1 axis. Suppose I want to move this object, but I don't want to move it up because I want it to like keep on staying on the floor. So how to do that is I click G, and then I click Shift. While holding Shift, I click the axis that I don't want to move on. So suppose I don't want to move on the Z axis. Now I can move freely on the X and Y, but it won't affect my object's Z value. This is very helpful for situations where you want it to be like perfect, like you're doing some exact modeling. You want it to be like flying in the air. You just want to move it like laterally, or sometimes you only want to move in 2 directions, so you don't have to move it individually. You can just do both directions at once and exclude one of them. And this works for rotating also, and it's all very helpful in scaling. Let me just show you rotating real quick. So rotating, suppose Shift X, so now it'll rotate in Z and the Y. And so let's go to scaling. So scaling, if I don't want to scale on the Z-axis, I just want to make it thicker, like this. This is extremely helpful, because sometimes you don't want to make it taller, you just want to make it equally scaled on X and Y. Or sometimes you want to scale only on X and Z, so you can do Shift X, Y and Z, sorry, and it'll scale that way. So instead of having to do two axes individually, you can do two at the same time. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about this hierarchy. So over here, if you see right now, the hierarchy is usually in the default view on the right hand side top corner, and it has two views. We will now talk about parenting objects. So parenting objects is a very helpful tool whenever you're dealing with a structure, or when you're putting things on top of other things. Suppose I was making a chessboard, which we actually will do later, but I'll just make a very simple version. Let me scale this down and then scale it on the Shift Z axis. Let's make a board, okay? Say that's my chessboard. And then I'll Shift A, add some pieces, cylinders, and GC. Okay. Then G Shift C, and then Shift D, Shift D, Shift D. Okay, say for now this is my chessboard. This is very basic. This is not anything special. So this is my chessboard. What I want to do is, whenever I move this board, the pieces aren't going to come with it. So if I parent these objects to this, I'll be able to move the objects individually, but whenever I move the whole board, the objects will come along with it. So how you do that is you click on all your objects and make sure the last object you select is the one you want to parent it to. Then you click Control P and Object. Now, whenever I move this, it'll move those objects with it, but whenever I move these individual things, I can still move them around. So that's the parent relationship. One other thing we can do is, suppose I made a sculpture. This is my beautiful sculpture that I just made, but it's all three objects, right? And I just don't want to parent it, because suppose if I parent these two so they move with each other, Control P, then what if I move this object up? It's not moving the other. So suppose I want to join all these three cubes to make it one object. Sometimes you want to do that so it's not just multiple objects. It makes it more clean. So just one sculpture object. So you select all your things and you click Control J. Control J, it doesn't parent it. It just makes it so that this is one object. So when you select it, it's one object. Okay. So now I want to get into selecting objects efficiently. So suppose I have a bunch of objects in my scene. Let me just do that really fast. Right. It gets a bit hard when you're selecting things to select, and especially if it's really small and you're zoomed out like this, you don't want to go and pin pick and move each of them. So there are different ways to select objects. So one is box select, and box select is where you hold and you can drag and you can select a bunch of objects. Second, if you go up here, here's all the ways you can select. Okay, if I do this select mode, this will select and it keeps adding to your selection. So if I were, instead of holding shift and selecting, it just, whatever you select, it keeps adding to those previous selections. So this is it makes it easy. Suppose you want to parent all of these balls to just one of them. So you click that and then you just select the rest of the balls and it just keeps adding if you missed a few, and then you can parent it to it. And also there is subtract. So if you select a bunch of objects, let me just select a bunch, okay, but you don't want some of them, then you can just use the subtract and then it'll subtract from your selection. Then this is merge, invert, sorry. So if I click this, As you can see, it's inverting my selection. So whatever I've selected, if I select a bit more, then it'll invert my selection. This is intersect. So if I have two selections, and if I have a selection and then I select some more, whatever's the intersection of both of those, it will keep that. And I'm going to put it back on normal, just selecting. So there's select box, which is the normal version. And then if you want to select just individual objects, you select, then you click shift, and then you can add additional objects to your selection. And then if you can click control, it'll deselect. So suppose if I have a bunch of objects selected, and I click control, then it'll deselect. And then now we're going to talk about shortcuts. So I think I've told you a bunch of shortcuts already, whether it be from moving, rotating, scaling, or just navigating. But if you go here, you can see by each of them, if there is a shortcut, it'll show here. Shift D is duplicate objects. Its shortcut is right here. Duplicate linked is here. Join is here. And Command C is for copy and Command V is for paste. So if there's shortcuts, it'll be added here. And if there's not shortcuts for something like parent, you want to add, like, make parent without inverse, you right click and you can click assign shortcut, and then it'll let you type a key. Okay. And one last thing before we go, I wanted to talk about smooth shading and flat shading. So if I have a sphere here, as you can see, if I rendered this out, it wouldn't look that smooth, right? And without adding geometry, suppose I just want to smooth this out. So if I right click and click shade smooth, then it'll use smooth shading, and it will basically take the average of all the vertices and make it smooth like this. But suppose I have a cube. We have a cube and GX. And suppose I add smooth shading on a cube, but if I try to merge the vertices by their averages on a cube, that doesn't work, right? So, let me see. If I go shade smooth, look what happens on the cube. One sec. See, it makes these weird artifacts, and it looks all wonky, because that's not how it's supposed to work. So, to go to flat shading, and I will let's do a cylinder for an example. Suppose I have a cylinder, GX. If I do smooth shading, see, it makes artifacts because the top and the bottom of the cylinder are not flat, right? So you can't smooth it out. So to fix that, if we go to this green triangle looking thing, it's some object data, and we click normals and auto smooth, then it smooths, as you can see, this central part, but it keeps the tops flat. So you can set the angle to get the best result of what you want it to. So if you have any errors with flat or smooth shading, then that is how you fix it. Okay, and that's pretty much all for this video. That's pretty much all for this video. Basics 2, we talked about moving objects and scaling and rotating them by fixed amount. Shift while scaling, rotating, and moving. The hierarchy, the outliner, and how to select objects there. We talked about parenting objects, smooth and flat chaining, how to join mesh, and so thank you for watching the second basics video. The next video, we'll be covering materials and doing a deep dive into how to make your objects colorful and photoreal. So, bye.